Hey folks, Matt from artoftheimage.com. Just reading on DP Review, they have a very interesting article on the Nikon D850. Now, it's no secret I'm a big fan of the D850. I even did that video recently saying that I think it's the perfect DSLR for most people's needs. And just to drill down on that, as I said in the video, what I mean by that is that I think it meets or exceeds probably 98% of people's needs out there. In most cases, it's going to be exceeding most people's needs. Interestingly, DP Review has titled this article, "The Nikon D850 could be the only DSLR you'll ever need." So they you could tell by the title, following up on or in agreement with where I was going with my thoughts and my video on the D850. In fact, if we scroll down in this article, one of the first quotes that is extracted in bold is, "The D850 might just be the most well-rounded camera Nikon's ever made." So they're feeling the same thing here. We're getting a lot of love for the D850. And it's actually quite an interesting article. This one was written by Carrie Rose. Feel free to check it out at DP Review. I'll see if I can remember to put the link below for you. You can check that out. And if you're looking at the D850, have a look. I'll put the link below on Amazon. Best price, Q&A, and interestingly, the reviews already are pretty stunning for it. We've got some good pictures here, and they've apparently shot a wedding with it here. And another quote, really interesting quote, which speaks to the tech and the speed of this thing. This thing is way too fast to be shooting 46 megapixels. So impressed with the speed. And in the past, when we've had high megapixel cameras, they're a little slower. This thing is not. This is a very fast camera, and it's 46 megapixels of full frame juicy goodness. Another quote that jumped out at me that I thought kind of was another. There's a lot of single lines in here that could give you a quick summary, a Cole's notes, if you will, on this article. Perhaps the highest praise I can offer for the D50 is that it, in more ways than one, it reminds me of Nikon's flagship D5 with one of the grips lopped off. So basically they're saying it's as good. It reminds them of the D5, the flagship, the best of the best Nikon. And it's just basically they're saying it's a little smaller and lighter. It's got one of the grips lopped off, the bottom grip, as we know from the D8 series. They don't have the built-in grip such as the D5, which I myself prefer for size and weight reasons. Another point they made, which I think has been a concern when the D850 came out, when people saw that it was a 46 megapixel camera, there was some concern how it was going to perform at high ISO. Now, I think that was fairly quickly dispelled when we saw a lot of the sample images, but again here, they've shot it, and that's what they say, that for high ISO, it hasn't been a problem. Where's the quote here? It was good at every ISO. So they've got shots here. They've shot this at a wedding too. So, a lot of times in a situation in a wedding, you're later into the evening, later in the year as well, you're going to need higher ISO performance, and they're saying it performs very well in that regard. And again, while they loved the camera in pretty much every regard, there was one specific note they made where they did say that no camera is perfect. And this is interesting because it parallels what I have just said, what I think was the single biggest flaw, if you want to call it a flaw, of the D850. And they said, here's the quote, "I'm not a big video shooter for freelance work, but I love a tilting screen to get some unique angles for stills. And while Nikon's live view autofocus is accurate, it certainly isn't fast. Forget about shooting moving subjects if you're not in a position to have your eye to the finder." And this is what I was saying before about how I felt the only real flaw with the D850 is not having a system similar to Canon's dual pixel AF, which is very, very good at tracking subjects in live view and in video, specifically video for those of us that shoot a lot of video, but also for those that are using live view to shoot photos. So to me, as I've said before, that's the main flaw of the D850, the main weakness, and this article parallels that. So I'd like to throw this back out at you guys after myself having read the article and seeing more and more feedback and reviews of this nature coming in. Who out there of you folks has the D850? Who shot it? Do you own it? Have you shot it? Have you rented it? Have you just got your hands on it and play with it? What was your takeaway from it? Is it similar to what they're saying here on DP Review. Is it favorable? Did you see any other negatives that we haven't seen discussed? Let me know in the comments below. Let's discuss it a bit, and I'd love to hear your feedback and see what you guys have to think. I have one coming. Not sure how soon I'll be getting it. There is a waiting list, and I'm going to see perhaps I can get one in early from a different source I'm working on at the moment. So we'll see. I'll be back with more on that because I'm very, very excited to get my hands on one of these things. I really, really like the D850. In fact, if I was shooting more pro photo work today, I would probably buy one. It is a very, very sweet camera. Look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Leave it in the comments below. Let's move on to our next segment. Let's have a look at some of the feedback on some of the commentary when we did the recent video on macro and micro lenses. And these were from Nikon as well, although there are some parallels to some of them in the Canon world. Wilson Newman writes in the comment on the video. He said, I've collected the 40, 60, and 85, so it's the Nikon 40mm, 60mm, and 85 over time, all from eBay auctions, and love all of them. If you're on an APS-C like the D500, then each and every one of them can do double duty as a portrait lens. Wow, hard to even pick a favorite. If you are truly going for pure macro work and not just trying to sneak yet another portrait lens past your wife disguised as a close-up flower lens, then the old adage of the longer is better is time-honored for a reason. It will get you a little farther away from skittish critters and also potentially casting shadows on your subject. They're all great, so go for a good deal and you'll be happy in the end with any of them. Good feedback here from Wilson. Thank you, Wilson. And I would totally agree on two main points you've made here. Double duty is a portrait lens. If you need a macro and you need a portrait, then go for the macro lens. Use it as a portrait lens, especially the 105. Beautiful portrait lens. And I totally agree with you, as I said in the previous video, longer is better. That is my preference. I do prefer a longer lens for exactly the reasons you're citing there, as I like to be a little further back, and it gives me that ability to, especially if you're into dangerous or poisonous creatures you want to take a macro of, like a snake or a some type of spider. Please be careful, but use a longer lens, and that's why my preference would be the 105. We have another comment in from Totally Awesome Photography, YouTube username. If you're shooting small living insects, go with the 85. If it's still shots or flowers, the 40mm lens is fine. The 85mm lens is a lot, but they usually have the 85 plus the 35mm lens bundle for less than just the 85 lens. So again, Totally Awesome Photography agrees with the longer lens, and good tip on getting the 85 and 35 lens bundle for less than just the 85. And I'll see if I can put a link below for you so you can see how you can get that at a better price. Bass Angler 73, Tokina 100 2.8 is awesome. It's screwdriver AF, but that only matters if you don't have an in-camera focus motor. So another option we have here, the Tokina 100, I've heard great things about it. Haven't shot it myself, but we do have other comments here coming up where people, it's a highly recommended lens, and you'll see, I'll put a link below, you can check it out online. It's highly reviewed and has good feedback on that lens. So you could look at that one, especially if you're going to use it as a portrait lens, because it's a 100 and it's 2.8, so it's a faster one. Edward Hines, get the Tokina 100mm, much sharper. So there we have another person writing in, thank you, Edward, saying that he's recommending the Tokina 100. Eshel Art Photography owned both the Nikon 40mm 2.8 and 60mm 2.8G, both great. If money isn't an issue, then get the 60mm. If you're on a tight budget, then nothing wrong with the 40mm, but remember, the 40mm is a DX lens and should be used on a DX body. So he's owned both. Prefers the 60, but says the 40 is good if you're on a budget, but is noting, as I think I did in the previous video, but if I didn't, thank you for pointing this out, the 40 is a DX lens, so you're only going to want to use it on DX bodies like a 5500, 5600, 3400, 7000, 7100, 7200, 7500, D500. All of those are DX bodies. You can't use them on full frame like a 610, a 750, a 810, and the new 850 at D5. Not that you would probably want to, but just to point that out. Again, I would go with the 60 over the 40, not only because it's an FX lens, but also because it's a little longer. James Salt Photography. The Nikon 105 has issues with the VR crapping out. The 100mm Tokina is phenomenal. So this is interesting. I know in general, I mean, VR is added electronics. Eventually, over time, electronics are going to break in a given situation between a manual lens and something that's electronic. Probably long term, the manual lens is going to be safer. However, I have had that lens a couple versions of it. Haven't had a problem with the VR, and I haven't seen a lot. But obviously, James has seen that issue. Dunny Monster writing in, I'd be inclined to suggest 90mm plus for good macro work. Anything shorter and you'll be right on top of your subject. This not only scares tiny critters, but blocks your light too. If you're a DX shooter, 60mm macro Nikon would be great for its macro, but also as a portrait lens. For the money, it's hard to beat a secondhand Tamron 90mm macro f2.8, however. Smiley face. So again, another recommendation for a non-Nikon lens, that's the Tamron 90mm, and I do know a lot of people have shot with the Tamron 90 f2.8 and really like it. It's a highly recommended lens. Again, I'll put a link below. You can check it out. It's very well reviewed. You could probably get it at a better price, and 90mm, you're into that longer reach, not quite a 105, but longer, and Dunny's suggesting as well something longer, especially for critter work. So again, another recommendation for the longer lens. John J says, longer is better, but what kind of macro and what's your budget? The Tokina was okay, but the build quality sucks, in my opinion. Okay, so John's had a problem with the build quality, at least with his. The 60mm D is an excellent lens for macro and portraits, not the fastest AF, but you really don't need it for most macro. And I would totally agree with that. In a macro situation, I'm almost always manual focusing. Just tends to be the way it goes. 60G and 105G are good, faster AF, and sharper, but I like the colors from the D much better. Honestly, using an extension tube on a non-macro lens works very well, and you get to keep AF for moving subjects. I'm still trying to find a 200 f4 to play with, but that lens is $1,800, which is more than I'm willing to spend on a macro. So, again, John is saying he didn't like the build quality on the Tokina. I haven't heard that before. Typically, Tokina has really good build quality. At least that's the feedback. And I've owned a few Tokinas, and they're built like tanks. He says the 60mm D is his preference for color over the G. And that's interesting as well, because this is a different lens. The G's newer and different coatings. The 60 and the 105, he's saying, are faster AF and sharper. And he makes a good point, too. And thank you, John. Extension tubes are a good inexpensive route to go if you already have a prime or a zoom that will accommodate an extension tube. I'll put a link below. I believe it was the Kenko ones that I've owned, and I've owned both the manual ones, and then you can get full automatic that continue with the autofocus and the exposure transmitting to the camera. I'll put a link below. You can check those out. Very good option to get, and then not only just investing less money with the tubes, you may be able to use them on various lenses that can accommodate it instead of just having one dedicated macro lens. So thanks very much, John. That's a good point and good feedback there. What do we have next? We have, I might slaughter this name and I apologize, Wiwar Siziska. I have Nikon 40mm micro with the D72. It's the sharpest lens I have, and its details are really awesome. But you have to be close to the object because the 60mm in DX isn't so good for longer distance. For snakes or spider photos, it's not so good. So he's saying again the same thing. A longer lens would be better, but the Nikon 40 is very sharp. He's very happy with it. Good detail, but he's saying you got to be pretty close. So again, kind of a recommendation for a longer lens, but for a budget macro or micro lens, that 40 is really good. Then we got 64B Bernard. I use a Nikon 60mm 2.8D lens for macro and to digitize film slides. Brackets, marvelous for this task. So that's interesting too, because not only do we have here a recommendation for the older 60mm f2.8D, which is a really nice lens, and also an FX lens. So if you do upgrade, you can switch to FX and not have to worry about upgrading your lens. But another thing you can do with it, not just a portrait lens, digitize film slides. So for those of you out there that still have a lot of film slides that need to be digitized, turned to digital, he says it's marvelous for this task, and I could see how it would be. So great comment there. Thank you very much. And now we have a today's question in from one of our viewers. This comes in from Jake on email, and he says, hey Matt, I am Jake, a big fan of your channel. I'm planning to travel to Thailand next year for my honeymoon, and I'm looking to buy a point-and-shoot camera for daily video recording and photography. I own a Nikon D850 and so need a camera basically for video recording in 4K, but I am stuck between a Panasonic LX10 or a Sony RX100 4 or 5. Please give your opinion. Well, thanks for your question, Jake. And interesting because you probably have seen my videos. You know I'm a big fan of the LX10 from Panasonic. It's a beautiful little camera. That said, the Sony RX100 4.5 is a really nice camera too, and I've had pretty much every version of that in and played with it. I would recommend the LX10 over the Sony for two reasons. First of all, price, value for your money. I think, it's about $300 to $400 less than the Sony, depending on what deals you're getting and where you buy it. I'll put some links below. You can check it out. And it basically does everything the Sony does. And that is, to me, a big deal. I mean, you're saving a big chunk of money. It's almost half price. So for the price, I think you're getting more value. And secondly, I like Sony's products, but I have had some issues myself with getting Sony customer service and support. I'm choosing my words carefully here because I don't want to insult Sony, but this is a valid criticism. If you look online, there's a lot of people that when they've had problems and issues with their Sony cameras, it's very hard to get satisfaction under warranty or get it resolved. So I have more faith in the Panasonic line than I do in the Sony, so that's my second reason why I would go with the Panasonic. First is price and value proposition, and the second would be I just have a little more faith in the Panasonic being a little bit more reliable, and if I did have a problem, Panasonic dealing with it in a prompt and satisfactory manner for me. So those are my reasons. What do you guys think? Which way would you go? Do you prefer the Sony? Do you have an opposite reaction as far as the reliability and warranty on Sony's? Or do you agree with me that the Panasonic is a better value? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Let's help out Jake make his decision here on a travel camera. And congrats on going to Thailand for your honeymoon. That sounds like a great trip. And if you think to remember, send us some photos. I'd love to see some of those and maybe show some here on the channel. So thanks, Jake. Thanks to you guys. Looking forward to hearing your feedback on that and the other things we've discussed. And stay tuned. We'll be back soon here at artoftheimage.com. Thanks.